Hey, what's up, Good Life? Thanks for joining me for today's 128 moment. We're in the midst of a series called Beginning to End, walking through God's big story from the end to beginning of Genesis to the amen of Revelation. And as we've been walking through it, we've reached the point where the people of Israel, God's chosen nation, Abraham's descendants, have been rescued from slavery. They've been led out into the wilderness, heading toward the promised land. And on Tuesday, during our 128 moment, we looked at how God delivered them when their backs were against the Red Sea. So when they get to the other side, they've already seen God do some amazing things, set them free with the 10 plagues, part the Red Sea, where they could walk through on dry land. But as they're traveling through the wilderness, taking a lot longer than they expected and taking a path that they would not have chosen, they reach the point where they run out of water. And the people of Israel start to grumble, they start to complain, they start to cry out to Moses saying, "We had it better back in Egypt when we were slaves, when we were living under Pharaoh's thumb, when he was murdering our infant boys. We had it better there. Take us back to Egypt." And then God moves in this amazing way and allows Moses to perform a miracle before his people where water comes pouring out of a rock, where God provides sweet water in the midst of the desert for his people to drink. Then they travel a little bit further and they talk about how hungry they are. And when the fact that they're hungry, that they had better food when they were slaves back in Egypt, and they grumbled and they complained against Moses and against God. And so God sent literally bread from heaven. He sent manna from heaven that every morning they would come out to be able to collect it from the ground, just like dew, but they were able to make bread with it. They're able to eat with it. And the word manna actually means, what is it? Because they had absolutely no idea how to explain what God was doing to provide for them. And so they travel a little bit further, having seen these amazing things from God, and they come to Mount Sinai. When they're out at Mount Sinai, Moses goes up on top of the mountain to meet with God, and the people of God stay down in the valley. They stay down at the foot of the mountain. And so as this is going on, Moses is up on top of the mountain meeting with God, having a conversation with God, hearing from God his law, and getting copies of the 10 Commandments written by the finger of God right onto stone tablets. It's this really amazing moment that even when I try and imagine what it probably was like for Moses to be up there, I'm pretty sure my imagination pales in comparison to what Moses was experiencing. And the people of Israel down at the foot of the mountain, they hear the sound, they hear these things happening. They don't know all that's going on. And Moses is up there for a while. So when God doesn't move according to their timetable, when they don't understand what's happening in their story, when they don't trust the heart of God, they start to write their own story. They started grumbling when they didn't have water. They started grumbling when they didn't have food. They started grumbling when their backs were to the wall against the Red Sea. And here, when God took too long, when Moses didn't come down, when they weren't sure what was happening, when it felt like God was silent, the people of Israel started grumbling again. But here they took it to another level. While they were down at the foot of the mountain, while Moses, their leader, is up at the top of the mountain meeting with God, the people of Israel convinced Moses' brother Aaron to make a god for them, to make a golden calf that they could worship. And maybe the golden calf could rescue them from being abandoned in the wilderness, because clearly God had given up on them. God was nowhere to be seen. They couldn't trust God, so they made their own. Now Moses hears what's happening down there. He comes down. He's furious. God is furious. Moses throws down the 10 Commandments, stone tablets, breaks them. God judges the people. But let's ponder for a second exactly what was happening. While Moses is on top of the mountain meeting with God, the people of God are down in the valley and they're making their own God. They're crafting something for themselves to worship because they don't understand the story that's going on around them. They thought they'd write their own, including writing in something that they could focus on, that they could devote themselves to, that they could look to for peace and for comfort. They made themselves a god, and catch this. The golden calf, this golden idol that they made it with the gold that they had pilfered, that they had plumaged from Egypt, that God had delivered into their hands from the Egyptians as they marched out. They had all the riches of Egypt as they marched out, and they ended up taking that and making themselves an idol. So it's at this point that I want to pause before we get into what we're going to talk about on Sunday. And I just want to ask us, do we ever do the exact same thing? As you read the story, as you watch that story unfold in the Bible, we shake our heads and we face palm, and we just can't imagine that the Israelites would do this. And yet, when our lives aren't going the way we think they should, when we feel like God is distant or silent, when he doesn't act on our timetable, we often turn our hearts, our affection, even dare say our worship toward lesser things. Sometimes we turn our worship toward good things like family, maybe even career. Sometimes it can even happen with turning our attention and our focus to religious activities. But the point is this, is that we are a people who are wired for worship. We worship as naturally as we breathe, and we'll do it as long as we live. We are going to worship something. And in our lives, it may not be a golden calf, but it might be our career. We might think, I don't know what God is doing over here, but maybe I can find my worth. Maybe I can find my meaning. Maybe I can find my purpose over here in my career. Maybe I can find it in the things that I buy, or maybe I can buy it in the college degrees I can earn, or maybe I can do it in this, that, or the other, whatever the case may be. If we are putting anything into our lives that takes precedent over who God is and who he's called us to be, we've got ourselves a golden calf. So Good Life, my question to you today is this: what's your golden calf? Maybe you have one. Chances are we all probably do to some degree or another at one time or another. Whatever the case may be, my encouragement to you is this, is that there's only one being in the universe that deserves our worship. He created us. He calls us by name. He knows the numbers of the hairs on our head, and he's big enough to hold the universe in the palm of his hands. And he alone deserves our worship. And really, he deserves our worship especially when the story doesn't make sense. We will never write a better story than he's writing, but we can trust him to write the story that brings him glory and works out for our good. So Good Life, what's your golden calf? And how can you lay that down before God and let him be priority number one? Love you guys, miss you guys. We'll see you Sunday, either online at 9:30 or 9:30 and 11 for our live services at the church. We'll see you soon.